Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Beethoven is one of the most important and well-known composers of all time. His music changed the course of music history, and his influence can still be felt and heard today. A lot of Beethoven's music is considered powerful, but as it relates to our channel, is there any music by Beethoven that is considered calm or good for relaxation? Well, I decided to do a deep dive into Beethoven's piano sonatas, and I believe I've determined, in my opinion, the most calm piano sonata, and that is his 12th. So today we're going to discuss Beethoven's 12th piano sonata. Hey everyone, my name is Matthew, and welcome to Calm Insomniac, where we're a community of people trying to get a better night's sleep. If you're new here, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for notifications. Beethoven was a visionary. He was known as a bit of a wild and eccentric character, and he took all the already established rules for music composition and threw them out the window. One important thing to note about Beethoven is he's one of the first composers to write music based on his own personal emotions. So before Beethoven, composers were hired by patrons. They were given a commission to write a specific piece for a specific time, often to be background music at a party, or sometimes you might have been the church composer. This is why Bach wrote more than 1,000 pieces, because he was hired by a church. Also, another composer, Haydn, he wrote 106 symphonies because he had a very long-time patron. But what's important here is that composers didn't have time or didn't have the energy to write music based on their own personal emotions or what they were feeling like writing, because that didn't bring in a paycheck. Beethoven was different. He was a real starving artist of his time, and he chose to write music that he wanted to write and didn't always take a commission. Now, of course, he did write for commissions and he depended on them, but in a lot of cases we do have music that is very personal to him and reflects his personal struggles. You can hear this as it gets later in his life. As you probably know, Beethoven became deaf over his life, and he really struggled with that, and at one point considered committing suicide because of it. So you can hear that struggle in his music. So with Beethoven writing music that is based on his personal struggles, this brings us to our next point. As I said at the beginning, Beethoven's music usually isn't considered calm or relaxing, and this is because he's putting his personal struggles into his music. But how does he do that? There are several ways, but the main way we'll focus on today is his use of dynamics. Dynamics are how loud or soft a composer tells the performer to play, and we're going to briefly discuss the 6 most common dynamics from soft to loud. Keep in mind that in music we use Italian terms, and we also abbreviate them, and I'll show that on screen for you. And those are pianissimo, piano, mezzo piano, mezzo forte, forte, and fortissimo. Again, that is from softest to loudest. What Beethoven would do is he would write in the music sudden, often violent dynamic changes, especially from very soft to very loud. There are many instances of this throughout his entire repertoire. One very famous example of this is in the first movement of his Third Symphony. Beethoven writes the orchestra to play softer and softer and softer, and then he brings back the opening melody for 2 measures, and then suddenly has 2 chords play very loud, and then he goes back to playing soft again, and the main melody has returned in full. It's an example that music history students study all the time, but he did this a lot during his career, and it's one of the most blatantly obvious ways that Beethoven was showing his personal struggles and why his music sounds powerful and sometimes violent. There are other ways that Beethoven would musically show his frustration, such as with tempo and orchestration, but those points aren't as crucial to what we're talking about today. Now let's give a brief overview of the 12th piano sonata. So Beethoven composed 32 piano sonatas. The 12th was written between 1800 and 1801, and even though this is his 12th, we still consider this early in his career. Around the same time, his first symphony would be premiered. I wanted to focus on Beethoven's piano sonatas because many individual movements of his sonatas are very calm. In fact, one of them is the first movement of the Moonlight Sonata, which I do talk about in this video over here. But I was really curious, is there a sonata that is calm the entire way through? And it was a really difficult thing to sift through all of his sonatas, but I finally settled on the 12th because it is the best overall example from start to finish of a calm piano sonata, for Beethoven at least. Also, I keep mentioning this word sonata, and what is a sonata? Well, it's basically a certain type of musical form that is usually written for a solo instrument. It's a very broad definition, but that's all we really need to know for today, and in case you were wondering what a sonata is, there you go. All of Beethoven's piano sonatas are considered masterpieces. Every single one of them is studied by pianists and music students. The 12th piano sonata is particularly famous because he took everything about the piano sonata form and completely destroyed it. This is one of the reasons why many music theory students or music form and analysis classes will look specifically at this piano sonata as my music form and analysis class did. But for our purposes, we're not exactly looking at the music part of it. We want to talk about the atmosphere or the general feeling about the piece and how that can make it calm and good for sleep. Let's briefly refresh ourselves on the 4 basic criteria that can make classical music good for relaxation. And that is, we're looking for a piece that is instrumental only, repetitive, in a simple form, and has a consistent, calm tempo. The first criteria is easily met because this is a piano sonata, which is an instrument, and it's the only instrument that's being used, so done. The last criteria of a consistent calm tempo is also met. Remember, we're looking for a piece of music that falls about between 60 to 80 beats per minute because that mimics our natural resting heart rate. Now, Beethoven himself didn't specify the exact tempo for the piece, however, most performances will fall somewhere within this range. Additionally, the tempo for each individual movement is largely consistent from one to the next, so we do maintain this calm tempo the entire time. Also note that, unusual for Beethoven, this piece is written almost consistently at a soft dynamic, and there are no sudden or violent dynamic changes either. The other 2 traits are what we're going to really focus on today. The piece is extremely repetitive, both rhythmically, melodically, and the form is extremely repetitive as well. This piece has 4 movements, and we'll talk about all of them a little bit. We're going to spend most of our time talking about the first movement and the third movement, so let's begin with the first movement. The first movement is a theme and variations. Now, as the name implies, you start with a theme, which is your main melody, and then you do several different versions or variations of that opening melody. The variations can be different embellishments of the melody with extra notes added. You can change the rhythm, you can change the key. There are several different ways that you can vary up that original melody. This movement in particular is a theme with 5 variations. I want to start by talking about the theme, or at least the opening of the theme, which I'll put on screen for you now. As you can see, we have 16 measures which are showing as a top line and a bottom line. The top line, the first half, take a good look at it, and then I want you to compare that to the second half. As you'll see, the second half and the first half are almost exactly identical in every way. The only differences that occur in the second half or the second line are some rhythm differences and a few note differences at the end as well. The reason we want to know this opening melody so well is because it's going to come back every single variation. Now again, if you are not a musician, you will hear it because Beethoven repeats it so many times and in so many ways. The embellishments don't make it harder for you to hear. Your brain will notice it and it will become clear to you. Now let's look at one of the variations. We're going to look at the last variation, so variation 5, and I'll put that opening melody on screen. I'm only going to show the first 8 measures this time, but you'll see how the original melody is embedded. The 5th variation probably at first glance looks really confusing, and that's okay. But if you'll notice, I've highlighted certain notes in this melody. Every single note that I highlighted is one of the notes from the original melody. So if you were to take out all of the extra notes and play only the highlighted ones, you would get the original theme. Also, a quick thing to notice is that most of the original melody notes are the 3rd note of a group of 3. This is one of the ways that Beethoven takes the melody and hides it or does something different with it. In this case, he's embellishing it both melodically and rhythmically, but again, that main melody is there, and even if you're not a musician, you will hear and recognize it. Next, I want to talk about the 3rd movement. Now, it's hard to determine exactly which movement is considered the most famous of this piece. However, I would say that most people argue it's the 3rd movement. The 3rd movement's subtitle is Funeral March, and that's actually something important to keep in mind. A funeral march in general is something that is slow, which we've already discussed, but it is extremely repetitive, another quality we've already discussed. So it makes sense that a funeral march would end up in Beethoven's most calm piece overall. There's also the whole association between death and sleep, with death being called the eternal sleep, and that's an interesting topic and something that's been explored in the arts a lot, and we can talk about that another time. The form of this movement is A-B-A, so as you see in the form itself, there is repetition. In other words, we start with an opening melody or theme area, we go to a different area in the middle, the B section, and then we return to that A or opening section. The melody is repeated over and over and over again, with really the only thing changing being the key. The key starts in one area, and then when Beethoven repeats the melody, it goes to a different area. This is something that you will hear as it sounds the same, but a little bit different. Just trust me on that one. Go listen to it, you'll see what I mean. Also, because this is a funeral march, the way Beethoven wrote the piece, there are a lot of really low notes that are being played, especially on the beat, and that creates this sort of low, pulsing drum beat effect, which if you really close your eyes and listen in on it, it'll feel like a low heartbeat, and that low, repetitive sound can feel quite soothing. I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but once again, the 2nd and 4th movements are extremely repetitive. There's of course much more that could be said about these movements musically, but that's not our exact purpose here today. The 2nd and 4th movements are livelier than the 1st and 3rd, but that doesn't mean that they sound too energetic or hyped up to be considered relaxing. The 2nd movement is technically a dance, but it doesn't sound like something you are necessarily going to dance to, and it has more of a swaying motion, which you would feel if you were dancing. The 4th movement is the most rhythmically active of the piece, but it also sounds like swaying or like a boat is rocking on the water, so it's nothing that is too energized. Alright, that's it. That's about as brief and non-musical of an introduction as I can give to Beethoven's 12th Piano Sonata. I'm going to leave in the description below a link to a video which has 3 performances of the Piano Sonata by different pianists back to back to back. It's really interesting to listen to those performances right in a row because you can hear the differences and the unique qualities that each pianist brings to their own performance. Also, don't be scared when you see that video's runtime. It is long, but a complete performance is about 23 minutes, and remember that there are 3 recordings placed in that video. What I want to know in the comments are two things. The first thing is, what are the pieces of Beethoven, piano or otherwise, that you listen to for relaxation? The second thing I want to know is, do you like this kind of non-musical or barely musical introductions to pieces I'm giving? In other words, do you want more music information? Do you want less? Am I doing it okay so far? I really want to know because I'm trying to make things as simple as possible because I know a lot of non-musicians will watch this, but it's also important to me to give some sort of music education. So let me know what kind of balance you think is right. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Facebook and Pinterest, and visit my website, calminsomniac.com, where I have all kinds of articles on classical music, sleep health, sleep tips, and some product reviews. You can also sign up for my email list where I'll keep you updated on everything I post. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.